G'day, everybody. Welcome back to Metaphysics of Fiction. I'm your host, Lewis.
And I'm Jack.
Today, we are doing a very big movie that started off a series of movies that went off for about over 10 years. And that movie is Iron Man, starring Robert Downey Jr. In my opinion, it has to be one of the best movies in the MCU. Like, they really got it right at the beginning. The idea we're going to be following is kind of like the idea of self improvement, more or less like self improvement after being on top for the longest time, coming crashing down, but instead of going into the darkest place and never coming back out, you really build yourself back up and then you can't emerge a changed man. The place I really want to start off with, though, with Tony Stark, is the fact at the very beginning, you can tell he's confident. He's very all up in himself, and he's just content. And you get that, you kind of get that when he's in the truck. And he rushes out after the trucks are being attacked, and he's behind the rock. He's calling for help, and then comes in the missile that had Stark Industries right there on its label. And I feel like that was a bit of a what goes around comes around situation due to the fact that he was the one that actually designed this missile. And because of him and his lack of responsibility with where his weapons went, it got into the hands of these people. And now this weapon was used against him because he just didn't care about what happened afterwards.
It's a nice little karma thing they sort of start off with, and Iron Man I think was a very good movie. It was a movie that really did sort of set that bar of quality. Anything that goes above it is an amazing movie. Anything goes below it is not the best in the MCU, but still pretty good.
Yeah.
It's like it was so good. I always I see that first scene, not the first scene, the scene just after the missile launch, where we go like 38 hours back in time or 36 hours back in time. And I look at Tony Stark and the life that he lives, and I think it sort of personifies that sort of misplaced talent or like that irresponsible person.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
and like you can kind of see that because so Tony is he's just amazing. He's incredible. He's a celebrity. It's a superstar. They even do that sort of like that
He's in the Rolling
Hollywood.
Stones magazine.
Yeah, the Rolling Stones magazine. They do that Hollywood Center commentary where it's just like Tony Stark at age 12. Like it's very it's very
He's very Hollywood. It was
he is.
literally Robert Downey Jr. for what he's going to be after Iron Man.
Yes, yes. And it's very it's everyone is on board that Tony is just the best.
Yeah.
And Tony is very good. And the characters that come up to him, so you have the one character who's the reporter, right? And she's an anti-war advocate. She's an anti-war reporter. She's sort of pushing Tony in terms of what about the weapons you're producing? You know, what about what are you doing? What are you contributing to this piece? You know, it seems like you're contributing to the war. And then you have like the super serious airman who eventually becomes Tony's friend. But you have
Rhodey, yeah.
yeah, you have Rhodey,
Yeah,
and he's
Rhodey's
sort of
always
sitting
been
there.
a friend.
Yeah, and he's sitting there, and he's like, oh, you know, he's super serious. He's been standing outside of the plane for 3 hours, all right, and by interacting with Tony for like nearly 3 minutes, right, he ends up sleeping with the reporter. So she ends up basically removing all of her principles in order to sleep with this warmonger in her eyes. And then you have Rhodey who is like, no, we're here to work, where I'm not taking a drink. And then there's strippers. Well, not strippers. It's the air hostess who have now become strippers, and they're both drunk as they go to the Middle East.
Yeah, like he really sweeps. He's charismatic, and that's one of the worst things about the fact that like he's like this. He's got charisma. He means people would follow him, but he just leads them to such bad places. I describe him at this point that he was just a live in the world kind of guy. He's not interested in changing it. He just takes what he has and just does what he does. And a person in that position that doesn't usually live in good places because a person like that would probably be in the middle class, a live in the world situation would pretty much be get up in the morning, work your 9 to 5, get home, turn on the TV, that type of situation. But a guy that has all that money, all that influence, it would just lead to a life of vice.
And
And
it's toxic. It's almost corruptible, right? And it spreads out to the people around him, right? Like regardless of their principle, regardless of whether they know him or not.
I think the only person, yeah, and the only person I think it didn't was Pepper.
Yes.
Like she's the person, like she's literally the maid that cleans up after his bullshit. So she's practically a mood.
I take out
she's
the trash.
Used to it. Yeah. That part was the best.
Oh, so good.
She's like, yeah, Tony, I'm not falling for this. Okay, I'm really just shut up. And like he said, when he's taking off the armor for the first time, he's just like, let's face it, this is not the worst thing you caught me doing.
Oh my god, yeah. So
I
funny.
love that line. Love that line. And it's just like, and that's how you really know that she's like, she's used to it, but she don't get swept up in it. She's the only one that can really kick his butt about it.
Yep.
That's why it's a good thing those two ended up together. She's the only one that actually can tell him what's what.
But I like that wording of living in the present. And what that sort of means for Tony versus other people, because I like through uni and through starting to be a high school teacher, right? I've had to do philosophy and theology and a whole bunch of stuff, and I think how old was I? This was 2008, so I was 12. I was 12 or something. I must have been. No, not 12. I think I was 14. I was 14 when this movie came out.
Yeah, it started when we were in high school.
Yeah. So I knew none of this, right? But when I was rewatching this movie, and when Tony was brought into that cave, the first thing I thought of, because I knew the rest of the movie, was that I think that either intentionally or unintentionally, they have put Plato's cave in this movie. And for those who don't really know what Plato's cave is, or
that includes me.
I'll explain it. I'll explain it very briefly. So Plato set up a scenario. Imagine that there is a row of people sitting in chairs, and they're chained to these chairs, and their backs are facing towards a light source of some kind, and all that they can see are the shadows on the wall. And so the shadows of the wall are effectively their life. It's how they see the world, right? They can't see anything else. They can't turn their heads or anything like that. So Plato asks the question in that scenario, what if someone gets out? What if someone manages to get out of their bindings and discovers the shadows on the wall aren't even created by the sun, right? They're created by a fire and people doing sock puppets, you know? What does he do with that information? What if he leaves the cave? You know, what happens when he leaves the cave? And Plato asked a lot of questions regarding this scenario, and I think this movie puts forward its own kind of answers to this scenario. So you can say that Tony Stark was always kind of in the cave, and I'll validate that statement later. But Tony Stark was always in the cave, right? The shadows on the wall was his perception of his company and the arms dealing that his company does. And his world was this mimicry of shadows on the wall. But his world isn't actually the shadows on the wall. His world is being misrepresented to him. He doesn't know about the under the table arms dealing. He doesn't he doesn't question whether making these large weapons, these Jericho missiles, is a good or bad thing. He doesn't question whether it's a good or bad thing.
Yeah, that's actually seen in the when he's talking to that reporter. When we go back to that, in my notes, I've said that when he was living in a world rather than changing it. I also wrote that that when attacked, he tries to justify the way he lives in this world. Like he's giving her his justifications for how he does things by saying that that the funding for his weapons also create the medical technology as long with and the feeding with crops or something like that, like intelligent crops. So he really justifies the bad by his limited number of good. And
Mm,
that's also how he justifies that's like how he probably get out of bed in the morning. And
mm.
that
And
level of
these
that
are the
level of ignorance.
yeah. These are the shadows on the wall. The things that help him cope, that influence him, that fool him into thinking that he's only doing good. It's not like he's doing any kind of bad. There's no negative consequence to this.
Yeah, his shadows, I would think, would be the development of medical technology, his weapons being used to protect America, to protect the soldiers. He
Mm.
and if you see a soldier, and if you see the gun, and you see it being kept safe, and if he turned around, he would see a terrorist holding his gun.
Yep, exactly. And
Yeah,
and that's the awakening that he has in that cave. He sees all the terrorists are actually holding his weapons.
yeah. That's he actually said, "Those are my guns. How did they get my guns?"
Yeah, and like the cave sequence is is very good from a
Oh, I
storytelling
love the
point of view. I the doc the and the doctor at the very end, sort of giving reorienting Tony Stark a little bit. Don't waste your life. Don't waste your life.
Yeah, I feel like that was like a bit of a Yinsen's like he's given himself his own purpose because he did mention his village was burned, his family is dead, so he didn't exactly
Mhm,
have much of a reason to live. In fact, he was probably contemplating suicide until Tony Stark came along,
mhm.
and he sees this as his one last purpose. Is one maybe if I can just save this life, maybe then my life can just have a little bit more meaning into it. That is why a scene in Endgame kind of irritates me a little bit. Are you aware that there was this deleted scene that was after, spoiler alert, Tony snaps the Infinity Stones? They were going to do something that was similar to when Thanos did the snap and he was taken into the Orange World and he sees baby Gamora.
Mm.
And Tony Stark was going to see this grown up version of his daughter. They scrapped that idea because they figured that everyone would be like, who's this girl? And I get that. But my problem is, why use her? Why not use Yinsen? He is
Mm.
literally the start of Iron Man's story. He's the one that got him to change everything. He's the one that got him to change. He's the one that made Tony Stark think. He's the one that put him on this path that when he reaches the end of his life, he could look back on his years and actually say, I guess I didn't waste it.
Yeah, I mean like there's so many problems with Endgame. Another hot take, Endgame bad movie, 5 out of 10. Uh, but
Are we even
but
going to be able to do like a whole MCU
wasted
playlist?
opportunities, wasted opportunity. And seeing the first Iron Man here and then sort of viewing Iron Man in Endgame, it's kind of sad. Like they don't there's so many payoffs that they could have implemented into Endgame just from the first movie and some of the other movies as well, and they waste that opportunity.
Well, let's see how they go with the rest of the continuation with the MCU. I'm not gonna lie, I'm looking forward to Fantastic Four. I'm really hoping for John Krasinski or
Mm.
Krasinski, whoever it is, to play Mr. Fantastic. I've also seen like an idea for Terry Crews to play the Thing. I was a bit skeptical, but then I remember that scene in Brooklyn Nine-Nine where he's doing this emotional speech to Holt, and I was like, wait, this guy could totally play the Thing. And
Mm.
also, if you're listening to this, I need you all to get behind me on this. But Javier Bardem for Doctor Doom, you know that'll work. All
Let's
right,
take
back
a
to topic
second
on
to
hand.
talk about um about Iron Man's core. Um,
Like
so
his
his arc reactor.
okay,
In
I
his
thought you
in
were
his
talking
heart.
about like the
Yeah.
core of the character.
Not the core of the character, although I actually think that these are sort of two in the same subjects. So I find it very interesting that it is in the cave when he gets his new core, and I think that sort of links back to what we were saying with the Doctor, where
Gibson.
yeah, with Yinsen, and Yinsen sort of saying don't waste your life, and I think I find it a little bit weird that that it was placed in sort of the center mass of Iron Man's body of Tony Stark's body. It is just in that center place. It's not his heart area. Is sort of well, I mean, his heart area is more towards the center anyway. Like it medically makes sense.
Well, it's not like they're gonna put it near his junk.
Yeah, no, it's not like they're gonna put it any lower or anything. But I always find it interesting that now that there is this glowing beacon, right? And I sort of see this as like a renewed purpose or a found purpose that has just been instilled in the center of Tony Stark, and that's what now drives his being. I can kind of see that kind of symbolism in there, and it interests me. It interests me, and I think that
Not to mention, he also updates it when he gets out of the cave.
yeah, and he updates it, and he continually improves it, and he reflects on it after he leaves the cave, and I think that's what the movie kind of proposes as the answer, because later in the film, Tony Stark is still blind to a lot of other dealings. He's blind to Obadiah.
Obadiah.
Obi to dealing under the table. He's blind to a lot of things that are going on around him, and I think that the answer this movie tries to provide is that, well, when you leave the cave, it's not like you have sort of reached enlightenment. No, you still have lots of blind spots. You're still learning. In fact, you're in a completely new environment now. I think the movie is trying to suggest that that's an answer to Plato's cave, and I think that's nice, and it kind of makes sense as well. I think you become a different person after you leave the cave as well. The movie even says that Tony never did come home.
Yeah, and also it's like the saying, only the first step to fixing a problem is just admitting there is one. So when he came out of the cave, he realizes there is a problem. He's admitting to himself, okay, yeah, there is a problem. But even admitting the problem isn't going to actually be able to fix it. He needs to learn what's causing the problem, how could he fix the problem, and all that type of stuff. And then he finds that it's going to lead to more problems, and he's going to need to fix those. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, the whole idea of Iron Man is continuous improvement. You actually see that throughout the entire MCU. He continuously improves the armor to the point where he can take on the Hulk. He improved it so he could keep Spider-Man safe. Because if you look at what he puts into future armors by past experiences, like when he fought Captain America, he made the Iron Man armor better for close combat. War Machine fell out of the sky. He put a parachute in Spider-Man's armor. So that's the idea of Iron Man: continuous improvement, even if something seemed perfect. That's why the cave was such a good idea. It was his lowest point, and then he continuously improves himself. He had that crappy armor that, even though it was actually kind of cool, got him out of the cave. So that took him out of his lowest point, and he continuously improves his armor up until the point where he reaches his highest point, where he's at this level of godhood by holding all the Infinity Stones.
Yeah, I think that's very true, and there's obvious links to mythology with the cave as well, with not just his lowest point, right? But this is a dark depth, right? This is a chaotic space, and in that chaotic space, there's something valuable you can draw out of it, despite the violence, the darkness, the evilness of it.
Yeah, it's like he's getting like a weekly tour into hell. And he's going to see what the problem is, and maybe he can figure out how to avoid going there.
Yeah, exactly.
And not many people would have that opportunity.
No. And I think this is a great sort of link to something else I think this movie does very well, and that's responsibility.
You got to make me say it, aren't you?
Yep.
With great power comes great responsibility.
and I love responsibility in this movie because a lot of the times you'll have a character, you'll just already have a character who is responsible, right? And they're usually, they're either like a leader or the relied upon secondary character, and or they have some kind of very, very solid grounding principle of justice or something that guides them through the world. And this makes them a responsible person.
Yeah, there you got Captain America and Batman.
But I love responsibility in this movie specifically because Tony Stark's not a responsible person. He has to learn how to be responsible, and for him, it's a burden. It weighs him down, but it also drives him forward. And it almost consumes him. And in the other movies, especially, it does consume him.
Yeah, especially in number two, because like with number two, he's practically dying, and he feels like he can't trust anyone else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
and he has to learn to let it go in the second movie.
Oh, don't make me start that one. Okay. A really interesting aspect I want to talk about is Obadiah and Yinsen together. If you really look at it, you can kind of envision those two kind of acting like the little angel and the little devil on Tony Stark's shoulders. Um, and for the longest time, the devil was winning. He was always whispering into Tony's ear, and eventually, kind of like it's like the angel kind of stopped talking to him. And then when the devil finally got strong enough, he finally tried to take out Tony Stark, and so he could actually be the new, so he could take over everything, like the whole full-on deal with the devil, and the devil takes everything. And that moment where he's about to take everything, Tony manages to survive, and the little angel finally gets his voice in. And it was only then that Tony realized how big the devil's actually gotten.
Yeah, and it's there's a lot of contrasting contrast in this dualism. So so obviously he meets his sort of angel while he's in sort of the darkest depths when he's surrounded by the world that he himself created, and he is always with the devil when he's back in America, when he's back safe eating a cheeseburger. There's a big contrast between where these two people actually hide, and I think that's very insightful, because it's usually the angel, the truth teller, that sort of comes to you when you're already when you're surrounded by things that you've created, when you've surrounded by that chaos or that violence. It's them who comes in. It's like, hey, wake up, look around you. Things are terrible around you. You need to start to straighten up.
Yeah, and his angel was more or less just waiting for him to listen.
Mm-hmm.
So for all we know, and there probably has been a lot of characters around that's been trying to tell Tony maybe what you're doing is wrong, like the reporter, maybe even Pepper on some level.
Mm-hmm.
For all we know, even Happy might have been telling him. His bodyguard, John Favreau, the actual director. I just freaking love how he's in it.
Wait, was he the director?
Yeah, the
That's
guy that played the
crazy. I didn't know that.
the guy that played the bodyguard is the actual director of the first Iron Man movie.
That's amazing.
I know, and he's all the way into it up to Spider-Man Far From Home, hitting on Aunt May. Actually, do you want to know something funny, actually kind of cool about his character in the comics?
Go.
See, Pepper Potts and Tony Stark never actually got married in the comics. She actually married Happy, and they had two kids. I think they adopted two kids, and eventually the poor guy died of cancer.
I dislike this. It needs to be expunged from the comics. It must be Tony.
Oh, they kind of had the whole flirty boss secretary type of relationship, but she married Happy.
Mm.
But he's dead now, so they could always just get her together. But
That's so sad.
Okay, I don't know who. No, Tony's not dating anyone at the moment. He just broke up with the Wasp.
Okay.
Well, no, the Wasp broke up with him.
Dude, the comics are weird.
Oh, you have no idea. Eventually, okay, for listeners.
It sounds like Bold and the Beautiful, where everyone's just dating each other.
If you want Bold and the Beautiful, you got to go to the current X-Men comics. No, not even the current X-Men comics. Go to any freaking X-Men
Go
comics.
to any of them.
Like, there was this one story in the X-Men comics where a guy named Multiple Man, who actually could copy himself, he had one night stand with two women, one with the actual one and one with the copy, but they were all drunk. They didn't know who was the actual person and who was the actual copy. And one of them was pregnant, and one of the girls got pregnant, and they didn't know if the baby belongs to the copy or the actual one.
Oh my god.
And the worst part was when the baby was born, it turned out it was one of the copies. It was a Zord back into Multiple Man.
That's so
it was
degenerate.
born. It was like, what the
Degenerate.
degenerate?
Yeah, degenerate. That's my comment.
Yeah, folks. Eventually, we probably are going to get to like comic series. I've already got plans to do the current iteration of the Dawn of X, maybe previous storylines and events, maybe even like the War of the Realms, and maybe even focusing on just general comic characters like the Fantastic Four. Because, frankly, a lot of comics, despite what people think about them being like kids' things, they are actually more or less for young adults. They're like with the current iterations of comics like the X-Men, I would not let my kid read it until he was probably about 13 or 12, 13, because some of the stuff in it can actually get pretty graphic.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've always sort of liked comic books, but I never really had the view of that it was a children's kind of thing, because I think I definitely kind of think it's more or less moving in that direction. But like, if I think of anything, any old kids movie from from our generation when we were kids, there were so many innuendos built-in jokes built for adults in these movies and in these like pieces of media that the adults understand. The kids have no idea what's happening.
You still do get that sometimes today. I mean, in fact, some of the stuff that you can get is actually today can actually be very serious. Like even in like Adventure Time, some of that stuff can go actually really deep.
Yeah, but like I don't know. I feel like they're getting more and more obvious. I think they're losing the subtlety. That's my issue. That's my issue.
I mean, hell, I remember watching Street Sharks. Anyway, we're getting a bit off topic. We'll talk
Yeah.
about more of this like in future episodes.
But at least on the topic of relationships, I really like Tony and Pepper Potts' relationship.
Oh yeah,
because I see it as a complementary relationship. Each of them sort of brings something that the other one doesn't have. Like Tony is
he's very easygoing. Very easygoing. She's kind of a bit of a like she's serious and. Oh, that's to the point where she's got a stick up her butt, but she's serious. She actually takes responsibility for him, and he's a bit more easygoing, and they actually really do complement each other.
Yeah,
definitely see what you're saying.
She's organized. She can organize multiple things. She's a multitasker. Tony Stark is hyper focused. Tony Stark is childish. Pepper Potts is basically babysitting him. As
like that scene, like the scene. I don't think you could even tie your shoes without me. I think I did manage. What's your social security number?
5.
1. You're missing like 6 numbers.
Yeah, and I always love these kinds of relationships because I always see them as a kind of true relationship. It's two halves coming together, two halves that make a whole. It's two people that complement each other, not two people who
are each other. Like
are each other.
Yeah, I mean, you get that whole idea in some TV shows and all that, where the characters could be like so simple. Like they say, "You'd be perfect for this woman. You got so much in common with her," and you're like, "But that means she is me. I already deal with me. Do you think I really want to deal with another me?" Sometimes I barely even want to deal with this me.
I think a lot of people in relationships they try and look for a person who is like them, and I don't think that's a correct answer. I always think that it is someone who complements you. It's someone who you have your commonalities and you share like similar principles and things like that. But when I think of my relationship with Adelaide, right? I wouldn't step outside for any reason ever. But because Adelaide's in my life, I go for walks every other day. You know, she takes me outside. She's active. You know, I want to play video games, and she doesn't play video games at all. And I bring her into my world sometimes, and it's a very nice thing. It's something that we can share together.
We all know you're happy with your damn.
Very happy. But yeah, I've always loved complementary relationships, and I'm really glad. I completely forgot this was in here as well in this movie. But I'm glad this movie has a relationship where they complement each other.
That's why I think in a future episode we should do the Dragon Prince, because that's actually very in there. So anyway, another thing I want to discuss. When Tony came back and decided to shut down weapons production, everyone's reaction was firmly against it. I think that's kind of like a representation of how sometimes the world can really, really, and sadly, really resist change, even if it's for the better. I mean, this guy is saying, I'm done making weapons. I don't want to see these things happen again. And they're all like, what's wrong with you? This is going to cost us money. What's wrong with you? This could actually cause more problems than more solutions. What's wrong with you? And he's thinking, I've actually seen what these things actually do. I've seen the reality. I don't see the numbers anymore. I don't see the big ass factories. I don't see looking good for the press. I've actually seen people die. I've actually been on the receiving end of my own weapons that was being caused by me. And it's like, and you can tell these people aren't getting it. They're saying, you need to get your head on straight. And he's probably thinking, I just spent 2 months in the cave pretty much getting my head on straight.
Yeah, and I think that to sort of bring it back a bit, this is an effect of that misplaced talent. It's an effect of that misplaced talent. Yes, like Tony Stark was very, very good at making weapons. He was very, very good at making all these military things. But it's a corrupting source. It's something that is toxic and just moves outwards. And all those people that Tony has been around and been influencing all these years regarding the weapons, now, you know, of course, they haven't had the same experience as Tony, right? So, of course, you know, they're going to be resistant to it. And now Tony has to deal with that as well.
Yeah, and that's not actually a bad thing, because that's kind of like let's say they're all on a rapids, and Tony's the one at the lead, and this rapids was leading, and all these people that he's influenced are all going on the rapids, and eventually Tony kind of like grabs something so they could stop, and he's telling everyone, say, look, we got to get off now, or bad things are going to start happening. And everyone's like, no, we're enjoying this, we want to stay on. And he's like, and Tony's like, look, I got us all onto this, so I'm going to get us all out, so you got to listen to me. And eventually, one by one, he eventually starts pulling all these people out. So he's really started making up for his own mistakes, not just for his, not just because what he did with the weapons, also because of what he's doing with his relationships. He's coming back. He's wanting a real friendship with Brody. He wants a real relationship with Pepper. He wants a real relationship with people. Yeah. So he even starts going to the MIT, starts paying for scholarships all the time. He wants to not just improve himself. He eventually wants to improve the world.
Yeah, he's not satisfied with the shadows on the wall anymore. He's not falling for them anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
He's seen the real world, and he wants to now influence and change the real world.
Yeah. Hey, quick question: when he was in the cave and hammering out his Mark I Iron Man helmet, were you kind of getting a bit of a Ned Kelly feel? I was kind of getting a bit of a
bit of a Ned Kelly feel. I'm not going to lie. I was also getting, like, for some reason, I was thinking Thor, but I don't know why I was thinking Thor. I hate that movie.
Big hammer going thunk. Of course you're going to think Thor.
I think I was just saying, I saw Muscle Hammer, and I was like, oh, Unga Bunga, it's Thor.
In fact, I really feel like it wouldn't have killed Marvel to do a scene where Thor is actually forging something with the hammer. Like, he's actually making it like a big, I don't know, like a sword, or
make his Thor armor. I don't know.
I mean, that would have been so cool. All right, we'll leave it there for now. We'll see if we can pick up anything for our next episode when we are going to continue our Iron Man line and we are going to go into Iron Man 2. Here our hero Tony Stark is kind of facing a bit of an existential crisis. He sees his time ending and he asks himself, what am I going to do with my last days on Earth? And this all probably could have gone downhill very fast if not for the entrance of Nick Fury, Black Widow, and his adversary Whiplash, played by Mickey Rourke, who, in my opinion, was very underplayed because I feel like the character was amazing, but they just didn't use him enough. So, everybody, until next time, thank you for listening in. Please leave a like, comment, or subscribe to our YouTube channel, or subscribe to whatever podcast you are listening to this on. And we hope to see you again. And if you are on YouTube, just please leave a comment, maybe even a recommendation of a future movie. Thanks very much. Anything else to say, Jack?
No.
All right.
I'm good.
All right. We will see you next time with Iron Man 2. Thank you again for listening. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.